years, Julia Bradbury crosses Cornwall on another railway walk.
Britain is a country that owes a great deal to its rail empire. For 100 years, the railways dominated the development of this country, the network that supported a global superpower. But today, our island is home to 10,000 miles of disused lines, a silent network of embankments, platforms and viaducts. For me and many others, they've become a perfect platform for exploring the country on foot. Welcome to the North Cornwall coast and the dramatic entrance to the harbour at Portreath. With all its rocks and cliffs, this has always been a notoriously difficult harbour for ships to enter, which is why it's quite surprising that in 1820 it was described as Cornwall's most important port. Well, today I'm going to get to the bottom of that comment and find out why. For a number of reasons, this railway walk promises to be quite an adventure. You could say that I'll be walking right across the country, from the North Cornwall coast to its counterpart in the south. There'll also be not one but two railway lines, both of which date back further than anything I've explored so far. This railway walk is a journey into the complex history of Cornish mining. Now, the harbour is the true beginning of my walk, but unlike many railway walks, there's no station to start from. And the reason for that is quite simple. This line didn't carry passengers. It was purely to transport materials to and from the mines. And there were no railway locomotives here either, because this was a tramway with horses and wagons. But despite the horses, Cornwall was really important to the railway age, because this is where the steam engine really took off. Now, it may surprise you, but the world's first steam locomotive was built by a Cornishman. But Richard Trevithick's greatest contribution to his home county was the building of high-pressure steam engines for local mines. It was this revolution that helped turn Portreath into such a bustling port. That and the fact that it had the region's first railway. In 1800, the railway map of Great Britain was, well, blank. But in various mining parts of the country, there was a realisation that a system of wagons on rails was far better than a bunch of horses when it came to transporting heavy materials. The Portreath tramroad arrived in Cornwall in 1809 with a route from the north coast, deep into the copper and tin mining territory. Other railways quickly followed, including the Redruth and Chasewater Railway, which soon ran from the mining areas to the south coast. Today, the two lines form the backbone of Cornwall's coast-to-coast trail. Now, railways, whether they're working or not, tend to get a lot of attention from authors and historians, but not here. These two railways have been really hard to research amongst all the facts about Cornish mining, but I have managed to find this local book which covers the precise route that I want to follow. And I'm also hoping that it's going to negate any necessity for an archaeologist. And I've not been the only person struggling. The helicopter team were here before me, filming my journey from the air. They managed to choose a beautiful, clear Cornish day, except for the area over Portreath. But this is where my walk starts. So let's take a look at the route. Heading east from the coast, there's an area of farmland before you reach the villages of Wheel Rose and Scoria. From here I head south into the heart of mining country. past old industrial communities like Todpool and the unmistakable Poldise Valley. This was the end of the line for the Portreath tram road. But as I head towards the south coast, I pick up my second railway, the Redruth and Chasewater, which followed the valley of the Carnon River and passed underneath the amazing viaduct of the active rail line to Falmouth. The village of Deveron, sitting at the top of a long estuary, is the first sign of the end of my walk. But I'll be following the water's edge all the way to the mooring point at the old railway terminus. You know me, I like a little bit of insider knowledge before I start a walk. And Dave Cuffwright is a man who knows this trail better than the back of his hand. Hello, Dave.
How do you do?
Now, you love this trail so much that you even lead cycle tours along it.
I do indeed, for people's health, yeah. It's great family entertainment without a computer unless it's on the bike telling you how well you've done it.
We know about the health benefits of walking, but along my route here today, what kind of things can I expect to see? What am I looking forward to excite me?
This whole trail right across Cornwall is this 100 and odd years ago used to be the richest place in Britain, believe it or not. Hard to believe when you look around now. Now we're left with a rich infrastructure of the trails that's left behind after these tramways. There's the one thing that this has got is diversity, because here we are on the north coast, the Atlantic pounds in, batters everything. As you move to the south coast, it gets more deciduous with woods and flowing greenery.
I obviously know a little bit about the history of the tramway here and how it serviced the mines, but how did it all gather such momentum?
Obviously, Cornwall's out on a limb on its own, and there's obviously a lot of ore got to be transported. There's coal that's got to go in to feed the steam engines to pump the water out. Taking it by road up country just wouldn't have been feasible. So really, it's the straightest line from where all the mines were to the sea, which is Portreath.
I know it's difficult to be precise, but what sort of date are we talking about? When did it slowly ebb away, do you think?
About
the beginnings
1860. About 1860 is when it started to wane on this side.
1860 seems like such an early age for a forward-thinking industry to be dying.
Right, I mean, people think of railways and nobody thinks about railways disappearing until Beeching in the 60s.
Yeah.
But 100 years previous, it was already happening here on one of the first railways in Cornwall.
Back in the day, the route of the tram road was a key feature of this seaside village. But 150 years has been more than enough time to obscure its route entirely. And my walk starts with a stroll through the back streets of Portreath. After a quarter of a mile, the coast-to-coast trail does leave the modern tarmac, though, and begins to take on a more expected feel. This isn't a walk where you'll find overgrown platforms and crumbling engine sheds. The remains of Cornwall's first railway are subtle, to say the least. But they are there if you look for them. Aha, now these are the original granite sets that the tramway used to run on. Sort of like early railway sleepers, if you like. If you look due south from here, you can just about make out the outskirts of Redruth, and that was the main mining town in the area. And that thimble of a monument straight up ahead, that was built to honour Baron Bassett. Now, he was head of the most powerful mining family in the area, and their status was so great that Portreath was often referred to as Bassett's Cove. This photo from 1893, with the new monument on its hilltop, clearly shows the vast mining infrastructure that the Bassetts looked after. If there was ever any doubt of the impact of tin and copper on this area, images like this quickly dispel it. Baron Bassett himself hardly fits the image of a brutal mine owner either. His monument was built with donations from a grateful public. In his time, the Baron helped build defences around Plymouth and campaigned against slavery. And he also left behind him the bustling town of Redruth, a town that exploded into prominence once the neighbouring seams of tin and copper had been found. Ah, now there is my first glimpse of some Cornish engine houses. And those 3 chimneys stacked on the horizon there must be Wheel Pever, and that is reputedly the best preserved engine house in the area. And well worth a little visit a bit later. Engine houses are very much a symbol of this part of Cornwall. Remains of over 200 are left intact today. But as we've already seen around Redruth, these fields were once littered with industrial chimneys, and there would have been hundreds more. Many were dismantled and rebuilt elsewhere as mines opened and closed. Two miles out of Portreath, my historic walking route disappears entirely, stolen by the modern tarmac. But the clues are still there. The local populace is clearly keen to keep a hold of its past. I've read that wheel in Cornish means place of work, and when you look at the map, there are just wheels all over the place. We've got Wheel Rose, there's Wheel Plenty, there's Wheel Busy, I like that one. But for now, this is the only wheel I'm interested in. The approach to Wheel Pever is dramatic. For those that know little of Cornwall other than its coastline, this would be a good place to come. The grace and stature of the engine houses is striking, particularly set on such a hilltop as here. And for me, it's an opportunity to understand the industry behind my railway walk. Hello, Kingsley. Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Kingsley Rickard is an industrial historian, but specifically, he's a leading light of the group dedicated to Cornwall's very own Richard Trevithick. Here's my question for you, Kingsley. Why 3? Why 3 chimneys?
Well, 3 engine houses because they were used for 3 different purposes. You had, usually out of 3, the bigger of the 3 would have been a pumping engine, and then you had a winding engine to wind materials up and down, and also a stamps engine, which was a type of crushing machinery.
And the mining game, like many, was a speculation game, wasn't it? It was whatever you hit first, whatever seam you came across.
Very much so, that's right. In modern mining, it's possible to drill down and tell what's there, but in the old days, until you dug a hole and got down there, you didn't know what you were going to find.
And that was exactly the case at Wheel Pever. In the mid-1700s, it started as a copper mine. But as the digging got deeper, it was the tin that took over, reaching a peak in 1880. The era when the present pumping house and its mine shaft were in full operation.
This was the main pumping shaft of the mine and is 660 feet deep.
660 feet, is that particularly deep as far as mine shafts go?
Not particularly in Cornwall. We went down to over 3,000 feet. So, you know, the mountains of the Lake District go that far upwards.
Wheel Pever wasn't a big operation by local standards, but it did produce a particularly rich variety of tin ore. Good news for the mine owner, John Williams, who controlled 9 out of 10 mines in the immediate vicinity. And finally, we get to the stamp house.
That's right. This was the stamping engine, and the huge crushing heads for the stamps were just along here. They worked 24 hours a day, and you could have heard them 2.5 to 3 miles away.
Of course, none of this would have been possible without one man who I know you think is a bit of a hero, and many people do as well, Trevithick, Richard Trevithick.
Yes, Richard Trevithick, or as we know him in Cornwall as Captain Dick.
Great name.
But he was a phenomenal engineer, and of course he's gone down in history as being the inventor of high-pressure steam, which really kick-started, I suppose, the Industrial Revolution.
Certainly the whole steam locomotive business.
Yes, he produced the world's first self-propelled road vehicle in 1801, and then moved on in 1804 to produce the world's first railway engine.
In your opinion, do you think he was overlooked as an engineer?
Yes, I don't think he really got the recognition that he deserved, but not being a businessman, I don't think self-promotion was in his mind at all. He just loved solving engineering and mechanical problems. Coal is something Cornwall doesn't have. We had to import it all. It was a pretty expensive thing to import. And so Trevithick worked on high-pressure steam, knowing it was going to be more efficient and would save Cornwall thousands of tons of coal in a year.
So he wasn't just vital to the steam locomotion future industry, he was vital to Cornwall and its mining industry as well.
Yes, to mining and engineering in general.
I tell you what, Kingsley, you get a great view of my walk so far from up here.
Wonderful, yes. You are looking from the north coast there, Portreath down in the valley, and you can see how we're much higher than Portreath. The tram road has had to climb considerably to get up to this sort of height.
And I've still got quite a long way to go as well.
Oh, yes, you have.
So I might head off like a pack horse. Thank you, Kingsley.
Lovely.
Nice to
see
meet you. Here's Dave on his tour. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Julia. Small world. Enjoy.
Thank you. Hello. Hello. Hiya. Back on the tram road, the industrial communities come thick and fast as I head from Wheel Pever to Wheel Rose. Look at this, a pint-sized image of Cornish mining. And if you put that together with the sign over there, I think we can hazard a guess and say that an enthusiast lives here. But to be honest, it's quite nice to have some clues that the tram road ever existed, because modern industry has just taken over. Cornish clotted cream is one local industry that's never involved any mining. But the Rodder's Creamery now stands where the tram road once ended. When the great experimentation with rail began, this was as far as they dare go. But by 1819, the line was extended further inland, right through the estate of the man who paid for it. Scoria House is still owned by the descendants of John Williams. He was a mine owner, a shipping and a smelting magnate, and a chief investor in the Portreath tram road. A true entrepreneur who could charge his fellow mine owners for using his revolutionary railway. And with his land still being private, I have to leave the tram road and make my own way to the massive mining valley of Poldice. Cornwall's coast-to-coast trail has developed around the spines of the two main mining railways. But even here in the depth of Unity Wood, you're only ever metres from industrial heritage. But in this walk of contrasts, the wood doesn't last for long, giving way to the collection of mining cottages at Todpool. A very quiet place today, but once a village that sat precariously on the edge of the vast and varied operations of the Poldice Valley. Poldice does a good impression of a lunar surface. Since medieval times, the valley has been carved up by mankind, producing tin, copper, and Cornwall's less heralded resource of arsenic. God, look at that landscape. It's hardly beautiful, but it's certainly dramatic. If it wasn't for the ruined state of the buildings, you'd think that mining was still going on here. And it's one of Cornwall's very last miners that I've arranged to meet, amongst the remains of Poldice arsenic works. So, Mark, I'm very excited because I'm sitting here with a genuine bona fide miner, and you were mining until quite recently.
Yes, I mined until 1998, and I started mining in 1981, and I followed in my father's footsteps, and he started mining in 1948.
True family biz. But of course, mining in the days that we're going to talk about now was a very different prospect, wasn't it? A whole different line of work.
Yes, when miners were working in this valley 200 years ago, it was completely different. In its heyday, there was over 50,000 people working in this valley. So great was the tin prospects here at the mine that a poem was written about it. And the poem went something like this. At Poldice, the men are mice, tin is a plenty. Captain Teague, he's from Brieg, he'll give you 10 for 20. Now that meant for every 20 shillings worth of tin that came to the surface, that team of men would get 10 shillings. So it was quite a lot of money for the work they'd done, but they did it because they knew this mine could produce lots and lots of tin. And this is how competitive these tin mines were.
So not a bad job to have had then, apart from the danger and the near-death experiences.
Apart from the danger, even though the money was good in real terms in those days, those miners weren't expected to live much beyond 35 years old. They had to climb down shafts, they climbed down ropes and chains and ladders, and the conditions underground, there wasn't much air, they're working up to their waist in water in some places. Very, very difficult and very, very dangerous.
Right.
But the mines here, the water was very acidic, and it was the arsenic in the water and the sulfides.
When most people think about arsenic, of course, they'll think about the poison, they'll think about the dangers.
Initially, it was annoying for the miners because it didn't give you pure tin or pure copper. But they found by roasting it out, the arsenic powder could be used as a pesticide. And apart from being a nuisance then, it became a product from the mine. And there's areas now which still haven't recovered from the arsenic poison in the ground. There are absolutely barren pieces of ground 200 years after the arsenic has been refined in the areas.
So when you think about it then, the money that they got paid and everything, really, I mean, it wasn't worth it. So the only people it was worth it for were the people that owned the mines.
The mine owners controlled how people spent their money. And the Williams family, they actually produced their own currency.
Ta-da! This little fella.
That's a Cornish penny, known as a Cornish token. All people who associated with the mine would be paid in pennies. Now those pennies could only be spent in the mine owner's shop.
So they'd pay them, they'd say on the one hand, they'd say, we're going to pay you really well for this dangerous work and you're the expert. On the other hand, here's your cash, but you can only spend it with us.
Yeah, that's what they did, and it produced approximately £50 million profit for the mine owners. Now that's a lot of money 200 years ago. So a lot of money, but then there's as we started finding new countries, the British Empire, they could find copper and tin in those other countries, and there's a crash in the copper price and the tin price. Many of these mines ceased overnight, and Cornish miners went all over the place. And there is a saying, wherever there's a hole in the ground, there's a Cornish miner, and that's very, very true.
Would you go back down the mines now, Mark?
Well, I had a serious accident just before the mine closed, where I had a rock come down and nearly killed me. I got a huge scar across the back of my neck, and it damaged some nerve endings on this side. So to do any long-term mining, I wouldn't be able to do it.
But is it something that you miss?
I miss every day.
Really? Working down a dark, dangerous mine, thousands of feet underground.
Yeah, lovely job. No hassle, no cars.
No people.
No people.
Well, Mark, thank you very much. It's been really interesting. I'm heading off, and I'm going to come across the second railway as well, aren't I?
Yes, what you're going to find about a mile down the valley is the Redruth to Chasewater railway line. Never actually went to Chasewater, but it went down to Devon.
I shall look out for it. Thank you.
You're going into the age of steam.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Before I reach my second railway of the day, there's the footpath heading south down the length of Poldice Valley. It's a hodgepodge world of mining detritus. The white piles of dust, known simply as the sands, are the barren remains of the arsenic works that operated until 1929. A unique section of Railway Walk. This is what Mark was talking about, the Redruth and Chasewater Railway coming in from Redruth. I am now firmly back on the track bed. The Redruth and Chasewater was the creation of John Taylor, controller of the massive consolidated mines. Taylor's business was so large that it warranted the building of a new railway, which opened in 1824. It carried 50,000 tonnes of ore in its first year. According to my invaluable guide, the Redruth and Chasewater Railway managed to achieve something that the Portruth tramroad never did, and that was to swap horse-drawn carriages for steam engines. In 1854, they introduced two. One was called miner, the other was called smelter. See what they did there? Miner, smelter, mining. Yeah, you get it. A third engine called Spitfire joined the line in 1859. But within 15 years, Taylor's railway was already going into decline, another victim of the global slump in copper prices. The Redruth and Chasewater eventually ground to a complete halt in 1918. Much like the railway itself, the last part of my walk follows the Carnon River as it heads towards the all-important coastline at Deveron. The much later railway line connecting Plymouth with Falmouth had to cross this wide valley, a challenge that was handed to none other than Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
It seems that poor old Brunel didn't have the budget to do this job properly. Reluctantly, to save money, he used timber fans to prop up the tracks. But as he predicted, just 70 years later, the entire viaduct had to be replaced. Not up to his usual standards at all. That's the original, that's the replacement.
When work started on Brunel's viaduct, builders found they had to dig through 30 feet of silt and mining spoils to reach the solid floor of the valley. This path here would have once been part of the estuary, before centuries of mining pushed the open water further and further towards the sea. Deveron too used to be a major port, a busy interchange between the steam locomotives and the waiting boats in the estuary's deep waters. The village hall today is actually the old maintenance shed for the likes of miner and smelter. For this is as far as the locomotives got. The end of my walk, much like the beginning, is along a simple tram road. An extra mile used to transfer coal and metal ore to ships further down the estuary. In 1900, this was where the railway ended, a quayside known simply as Point. A classic Cornish beauty spot. But the end to a very industrial walk.
Just look at the difference between here and the sea-battered cliffs of Portruy. Even this picture-perfect Cornish estuary can't escape the presence of the mining industry. Just around that corner there would have been a tin smelting works, and long before that, before the railway even, teams would have been working in and under the estuary, sifting through the sand and the gravel looking for bits of tin ore. This really was a world devoted to extracting as much from the ground as possible.
Of all the old railways I've explored so far, none has been so entirely linked to a single purpose. This has been a fascinating walk through a varied and often man-made landscape. But most of all, it's been a walk through the changing fortunes of a vast local industry.
And let's not forget that today I've also seen where the steam engine first showed its true potential. And for that, all my other railway walks can be truly grateful.
And there's another railway walk with Julia next Thursday here on BBC4. Next tonight, charting the last days of steam with Time Shift.
An ambitious film director was running out of time to finish a big-budget gangster movie.
Action!
Starring one of Bollywood's biggest stars, Sanjay Dutt. But when his leading actor was charged with possession of weapons and linked to the criminal underworld, the lines between drama and reality began to get a little blurred. Shot in Bombay, Storyville, Monday at 10 on BBC4.
Well, we met them just half an hour ago in Absolutely Chuffed. The A1 Steam Locomotive Trust take their place alongside other steam enthusiasts now on BBC4 as Time Shift investigates the last days of steam.